We are going to go ahead and get started with our third session of the day. Again, we'll have breaks at the bottom of every hour. We'll hear from our District 7 legislators next, and then Dr. Brian Maher at 1 o'clock. But right now, I'm going to turn it over to Mark Hyde, who is the CFO at South Dakota Soybean and a member of the board for Brookings Economic Development Corporation. So Mark, I will turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Kelsey. Today we're happy to have with us South Dakota's Secretary of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources and the Interim Secretary of Agriculture. Obviously, we all know the importance of agriculture to South Dakota's economy and community in general, but equally important to the community is protecting the public health and environment. Businesses in Brookings and across the state work with the Department of Environment and Natural Resources to obtain various permits and compliance of those permits to ensure the community has access to clean water, clean air, etc. Hunter Roberts has served South Dakota as the Secretary of Environment and Natural Resources since 2019. This past August, Governor Noem announced her plans to merge the Departments of Agriculture and Environment and Natural Resources into the Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources, and asked Mr. Roberts to lead that merger and head the new department. Hunter began his career in public service with the Governor's Office of Economic Development in 2007 as the Assistant State Energy Director, and soon after transitioned to the Energy Policy Director, where he led the state's efforts to promote business development in power generation, energy production, and clean energy manufacturing until the end of 2014. Hunter then went on to serve as policy advisor to Governor Dennis Dugard for 4 years. Most recently, Hunter served as the Deputy Secretary and Director of Labor and Management at the Department of Labor and Regulation. Hunter resides in Pierre with his wife and 2 children. He is a 5th generation South Dakota farmer and rancher who owns and operates a farm and ranch southeast of Fort Pierre with his family. Without further ado, I welcome Mr. Hunter Roberts.
Well, thank you, Mark. I really appreciate it. Can everyone hear me? Excellent, excellent. Well, it's been interesting times and very busy for me the last few years, it seems like, but happy to join you all today. Thank you for that introduction, Mark. I really appreciate it. Like Mark said, I've been in state government for 14 years now, but also moving back to Pierre after going to school for a long time. I went to the other school, USD, got my undergrad in business and then my MBA in law degree as well. After passing the bar, I moved back to Pierre with my wife. She actually had an opportunity for career advancement in Pierre as well. So long story short, with our farm and ranch is just southeast of Fort Pierre, 20 miles. So we've always wanted to be active in the farm and like that lifestyle for our kids too, to teach them how to work. So it was a good opportunity to move back to Pierre. Working for the state's been great. Since then, we have a 12-year-old son, Christopher, and a 10-year-old daughter, Serena, a 7th and a 5th grader. So that's been busy times, and it's been great thus far. Certainly, South Dakota is a great place to raise a family, and we're happy to be here. So looks like Kelsey might be trying to bring up the slideshow, hopefully. Yeah. So what brings us here today? Certainly, the Department of Agriculture, Governor Noem in late August announced the merger of the 2 agencies. Since then, it's been a bit of a sprint as we work through this process. I became the interim secretary September 8th, right after the state fair. And then Governor Noem, we merged the 2 budgets for the governor's budget address. Yesterday, January 19th, the governor issued her reorganization executive order creating DANR. If the legislature fails to disapprove or take action, then April 21st, 90 days after the issuance of that executive order takes effect, the merger will become permanent.
Hunter, are you seeing the screen share?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, great. So, just wanted to make sure.
Perfect. So that's kind of timeline we're looking at and the process that it takes to get there. Next slide, please. So I think this tells a lot of the story of kind of who we are and what the department wants to do. the merged department's kind of mission, vision, and values to protect and preserve South Dakota's agriculture, environment, natural resources through effective regulatory services, natural resource conservation, and financial and technical assistance. Our vision is a South Dakota, a prosperous economy, diverse agriculture opportunities, clean air, clean water, and healthy families. And then certainly our values, integrity, excellence, and customer service. I'll touch base on a few of those as we go along. Next slide, please. So here's kind of what we're looking at for the merged agencies organizational chart. Looking at kind of, we'll start at the bottom and move up. Agriculture and environmental services. Actually, the Department of Agriculture had an agriculture services, and the Department of Environment and Natural Resources had an environmental services. So we've merged parts of those two divisions, hoping to find some efficiencies, some better ways to do things. I'll chat about a few of those efficiencies and ideas we have that we think will result in better results for the citizens of the state. Resource conservation and forestry was actually a Department of Agriculture division. We think that this merger, we moved watershed protection and plant industry under an apiary into resource conservation and forestry. Watershed protection was in the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. Plant industry and apiary were in ag services. So just kind of moved a few of those pieces around. And then financial and technical assistance. A lot of people don't know that on the general street that for water and waste funding and landfill recycling funding, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources actually provides a lot of resources for our communities, for our people that take out the trash, helping them, and our landfills where the trash ends up, helping them keep our state clean and keep our water clean, our drinking water clean, and also helping them keep our rates low when it comes to water and wastewater fees. We provide millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars a year in low interest financing, and then kind of spread out between those three groups to approximately $12 to $14 million in grants to help keep rates low. And then the State Fair was a Department of Agriculture division. Not really much changes there. We'll touch on kind of big things that are going on at the State Fair right now, but not a lot of changes there besides just the merged agency. Moving up, the Office of Water is Jean Goodman. She's also serves as the Deputy Secretary. Coincidentally, she was the division director for the Division of Environmental Services and in DENR. She's been with the agency for 40 years. She's an engineer, professional engineer, smart lady, definitely understands the environmental world and how to work with the EPA and how to work with regulators to make sure that we enforce our laws and work with people to get people in compliance. So drinking water, surface water quality, and water rights all fall under her venue. So it's not as big a division as she's run before, but then she picked up the deputy secretary jobs. So no, she's staying busy. Moving up, we have a general counsel vacancy right now. Our director of finance was the DENR director of finance, so she took on some more duties. Jason Simmons, our director of outreach, comes over from the governor's office. He's been a real good hand to help get our arms around the things. His main duty is the merged agency has 20 different boards and commissions, state boards and commissions that it works with, 10 of which we staff and manage. So there's a lot there to kind of get your arms around of. So Jason's duty is to make sure that we know what they're up to, and we know that what we're up to, and we're all on the same page, moving South Dakota forward. And then Brian Walsh is our director of public affairs. He does everything from communications to IT to website type stuff, and helps on the public policy side too. So that's kind of a snapshot of what the DANR organizational chart looks like. I will say that 98% of these changes are already made. These staff are in place. We've pulled these divisions together. We have a lot of work to build camaraderie and understanding of what everyone does. But yeah, so a lot of these changes are already made. My big impetus was that I do not want to put staff through the situation where they're moving once and then moving again and changing duties. the reality of what we proposed in the governor's merger is most staff are not changing what their day-to-day duties are. They will still do the same regulatory work or other duties that they had before. You know, an example would be environmental funding, providing funding and for municipality type projects. So next slide, please. So why the merger? Is it good for South Dakota? I guess our thoughts are absolutely. Agriculture, conservation, and natural resource protection go hand in hand. So it makes sense for South Dakota to regulate these industries under one department, the DANR. Providing effective and efficient services help producers spend less time on government requirements and more on getting their work done. We see this as a one-stop for ag producers, a one-stop for several other ag business groups too, so they know where regulatory they fall into, how that compliance works, instead of should I go to DENR on this or the Department of Ag on this. It's a one-stop for them moving forward. The merger creates efficiencies, saves money, and puts us in the best position to protect and preserve South Dakota's agriculture, environment, and natural resources for today and tomorrow. To back up just a little bit, one of the impetuses that I think makes this merger make a lot more sense is previously under other governors, there was an ag business development group in the Department of Agriculture. So they were recruiting ag businesses. They were providing incentives for ag businesses. When Governor Noem came on board as the governor, she did an executive reorganization order and moved that group over to the governor's office of economic development. That group is doing a lot of that same mission that they were at the Department of Agriculture over at GOED, but by not having that business development group in the department, I think it really in either of the two departments, I think it really gives us that. Well, I know it makes both agencies more regulatory in nature, but then also removes that perceived conflict of interest that some might have, because we're not recruiting businesses, we're not working to provide incentives for them. That's just not what the mission is of these two agencies are. So next slide, please. So talking about efficiencies that we have, combining resources from both agencies. An example I like to bring up is on the resource conservation and forestry side of things, there's a conservation office in the Department of Agriculture. They provide incentives for tree belts, watershed protection, habitat projects for ag producers largely through conservation districts. So the Department of Agriculture's conservation group provides grants through the Conservation Commission to conservation districts to do on-the-ground practices that help producers on water quality, habitat protection, things of that nature. Through DENR, the Watershed Protection Program, we utilize EPA funds, the tune of $3 to $4 million every year, to provide incentives to largely provide incentives for on-the-ground water quality projects as well. So an example would be DENR is supporting projects that support riparian buffer strips along waterways that help prevent degradation of our waters. Other options is we'll work with USDA and RCS to provide, and ag producers to provide incentives for manure management containment systems for projects that don't hit that combined animal feedlot level, or consolidated animal feed operation level, but are small enough or smaller than that, but still big enough to cause some issues with water quality. So we think bringing those two groups together, where they're providing on-the-ground resources for producers and water quality initiatives, and conservation in general, just makes a ton of sense. We have plenty of instances where those two have had overlapped and worked in the same project. So having them on the same page, not siloed between two agencies, has been a good thing thus far. And we'll chat about one of the projects that group's working on later, but it's worked so well so far. Streamline regulatory services. So I've talked about this with several groups. One example that through the merger that we've been able to capitalize on is the DENR regulates feedlots. The Department of Agriculture regulates dairies, has a dairy egg or a dairy and egg inspection program where they regulate the dairy and egg industry. We pulled those two groups together, and what we're doing with that to streamline it is, if you're a dairy today in a pre-merged agencies, the Department of Agriculture is going to come out and inspect you twice a year. In the alternative, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources are going to come out and inspect you once a year. Our thoughts are, what the DENR inspection is we're checking the outside manure management system, containment, make sure that your buildings comply with what plans we've signed off on. What we are going to do is cross-train those inspectors from both sides of the house into being able to do both jobs. By doing that, we're not going to have to drive a vehicle out and inspect these people an extra time a year. And so instead of 3 inspections from a government agency, it'll just be 2. So we think that's going to be some cost-saving measures. Additionally, when you bring the inspection side from both shops, it actually can make the department more responsive to when we get complaints or when we have concerns. We have a bigger footprint spread across the state, not as many people peer centralized or Brookings centralized or Millbank centralized. It just gives us a better footprint across the state so we can be more responsive to complaints that happen. The quicker we can get there, the quicker we can assess the situation and hopefully find solutions for it. Another advantage, kind of talked about cross-training inspectors. Another example would be if there's an ag chemical spill today, or I guess I should say pre-merger, the Department of Agriculture would send an inspector out, the DENR would send out an inspector, and they would both do reports on the spill with the responsible party and have a remediation plan with the responsible party. Depending on what the remediation and plan entails, it might just be the Department of Agriculture, it might be the DENR, it might be both agencies having a remediation plan that the responsible party would need to follow. So through this merger, we're able to turn it into just one person, making sure that all the rules and regulations from both departments are met, and there'll be one remediation plan that they need to follow. What I guess I should have mentioned right away is this merger creates efficiencies, some cost savings, and I think just a better way of doing business. What it does not do is change any rules, regulations, whether they be state or federal, on what the department's missions are. So the Department of Environment and Natural Resources is going to have this, and the Department of Ag and Natural Resources is going to have the same requirements in law that we have today to make sure that our lakes and streams are staying clean and to prevent natural disasters, to prevent those terrible type activities that happen when we have commerce going on, and to respond to them in a responsible manner. So we're not changing those rules and regulations. A lot of the rules and regulations that both departments follow are delegated from the federal EPA, and they're not going to let us shirk those duties. So there's no changes there. I mean, we're certainly definitely going to continue to regulate industry, but what we think is the way we regulate them will be more responsive and more streamlined. So it's an easier understanding between both groups. There is some cost savings with the merger. We propose to eliminate 5 full-time FTEs. All those positions are currently vacant. One example would be the cabinet secretary and the executive assistant from the Department of Agriculture. We had a couple positions in the Department of Environment and Natural Resources that we were able to also eliminate through efficiencies through the merger. So estimated cost savings of almost $450,000. Next page, please. Sorry if I'm rushing through this. I want to give certainly enough time for questions at the end. DPS and Wildland Fire. So through the merger discussions, we've determined that transferring the Department of Agriculture's Wildland Fire Division that's based in the Black Hills to the Department of Public Safety would be a better fit. Department of Public Safety is a first responder agency, and we believe obviously Wildland Fire is a first responder agency too, responding to wildfires. We think that those unique emergency response capabilities between the Department of Public Safety and Wildland Fire, bringing them in-house to one group would be a better fit, and certainly better lead to better utilization of Wildland Fire's unique capabilities. So next slide, please. So accomplishments from 2020, I'd be remiss if I didn't brag a little bit about things that we've done. DENR was the first state in the U.S. to complete and submit its 2020 Integrated Surface Quality Report. We're proud of that. That Integrated Surface Water Quality Report's out online on our website. It categorizes water quality in most of our lakes and streams in our state, and includes a plan on how we can bring them back into compliance when they're not meeting our water quality standards. We've collected, last year collected over 3,800 gallons of firefighting foam, PFAS. I don't know if you've all heard of that. It's a very effective firefighting foam that's largely used at airports. But what we've learned out over the past decade is that it lasts a very long time and can be toxic, and it seeps down into our groundwater and is not what we want in our groundwater. In South Dakota, direct impacts is Ellsworth Air Force Base. Some wells have been contaminated near the base because they've used PFAS foam for a long time. And then the Sioux Falls Airport, the city of Sioux Falls had to close down over 10 of their drinking water wells because of PFAS contamination. So the DENR's perspective is, let's get a bunch of this stuff voluntarily out of the hands of people that might use it. So just kind of reduce that risk by getting rid of it. Some of the containers that this stuff was in were pretty degraded, and I know our staff was very excited to just get it out of there before it turns into an issue. PFAS is still required on Army, Air Force bases, but what we've learned about PFAS is it works well. You just need to clean it up immediately when you're done, so it's not able to seep into the ground. So we also, right before Christmas, rolled out a lead daycare program where we are providing free drinking water testing for daycares across the state. And then additionally, if problems are found, we have a vendor that will provide technical assistance and a percentage reimbursement or a partial reimbursement for any of the fixes that need to happen. Lead is, children are much more susceptible to lead poisoning than adults are. So we thought that was a neat thing, working with the Department of Social Services to get out there ahead of that and help incentivize addressing those problems if we have any. We have not found any big issues, which has been great news so far. And then the Big Sioux River Flood Information System, that rolled out 2 years ago. It was a big help in 2019 when we had flooding. We were honored by the American Council of Engineering Companies as for that information system and the idea behind it and how well it's been rolled out. So yeah, just a little more snippet of information there. Next slide, please. Another thing the department rolled out this year is a harmful algal blooms website page, HABs, and protocol to go with it. So we work closely with Game Fish and Parks to, HABs are harmful algal blooms that occur when toxin producing algae grow in a body of water. This typically happens in the summer. They develop quickly and dissipate quickly, but they should be avoided by people and animals. We'll send staff out, or Game Fish and Parks has staff out that are informed on what HABs look like. We'll get there, take samples, make an assessment on the grounds, and then if we think they are HABs, we'll work with the local county or local community or Game Fish and Parks to get a press release out there so the media knows that you should stay away from it. Coincidentally, HABs usually happen usually it's not the whole lake, it'll be a side of the lake, and it's perfectly safe to swim, outside of the algal bloom, but it's just something that people need to be aware of. Certainly there's always a handful of pets that drink this water and don't make it. And certainly for humans, you definitely do not want to drink it, but it also causes rashes and it's not good for people. So that's something out there. We keep a website on it, and we think that it's just a community service type thing to help keep people safe and know kind of where they're happening and how often are they happening across the state. Next slide, please. So measures of success, clean air. All of South Dakota meets the national ambient quality or air quality standards. That's been most years that happens. We feel real good about that. There's a lot of states that don't. The most states don't. So we do have clean air, clean water. 95% of our community services community water system serving 97% of our regulated population had no health related violations in fiscal year 20. So safe drinking water is very important for the agency. On top of that, I talked about that watershed protection group and the federal funds they provide for on the ground resources for clean water activities. We had 9 projects that did $3.49 million worth of water quality protection projects. Natural resource planning, the Department of Agriculture wrote and reviewed 174 plans assisting communities, producers, and partners with natural resource management. And then, like I said, our environmental funding side of things provided $187+ million for water quality, wastewater, and solid waste infrastructure improvement projects. So we get a lot of money out there every year, and hopefully that helps, or we know it certainly helps our communities and systems keep those rates lower than they could be. Next slide, please. Here's an example of what the 2 agencies can do before the merger, and we think that we'll just see more of this after the merger. So this summer, Ag Tagger Cooperative reached out to DNR and the Department of Ag and said, hey, we have a bunch of old grain bags, aeration tubes, and pesticide containers that our vendor who was used to recycle them is no longer taking them. How can we figure out a way to resolve this problem? We were able to work with a couple different groups between the 2 agencies and come up with an outcome. So all those materials were recycled. It's just another example of how, agriculture and environmental experts working together. Through this merger, DENR has a couple recycling folks. They provide more technical assistance, not as much on the ground, and then some financing assistance. In the alternative, the Department of Agriculture has a recycling group too that does a lot of active active activities on recycling. They'll collect pesticide containers and shuttles and actively work to recycle them. So we've combined those 2 groups together. We think that'll just help with better outcomes there, having kind of 2 sides of the coin, not separate agencies with a group working just on recycling. So next slide, please. Not sure how interested people are on this. Last year, DENR had a bill. We had 40 orphan wells from 2011-2012 timeline left up in Hardin County. We went to the legislature. They provided funding for us to remediate those wells, plug those wells. This fall, we plugged 7 of them, and then the weather got bad. In the meantime, we talked to, with the option of plugging them, we actually had some interested oil and gas producers come forward that wanted to develop that natural gas. So just a few weeks ago, our school and public lands held a mineral auction. Our Office of School and Public Lands held a mineral auction. Through that, we had 7 wells and 2,000 acres that were rented for $58,640. That funding goes straight to state education funding. So neat deal. Instead of having to spend money to remediate them, we actually are hoping that those come back online. Those companies are also looking at 6 other wells there at the site that they would like to also produce gas from. Additionally, when we produce gas, there's mineral severance taxes that the state will collect too, and the county. So some advantages to that. Additionally, the DENR requires at least $100,000 bond for them to plugging cost bond to produce that land, or to produce that oil and gas, or more. I guess it depends on what our Board of Minerals and Environment comes up with. But so we have a few steps before they can start producing gas, but we feel good about that and where that's at. Next slide, please. So I know one of the questions was industrial hemp, where's it at? We have a program now. In 2020, the legislature created an industrial hemp program. We, through a long process, got USDA approval for that program, went through the state's rules hearing and became active December 28, 2020. We have a 60-day window to sign up new applicants for this year. Thus far, we have 3 processors and 2 growers that have applied for the program. So we have a program up and running. It'll be interesting to see how interested people are and how much hemp is grown in South Dakota. It's largely an unknown for us. It's just, we'll see. Certainly ag economics have changed a little bit with some higher commodity prices on the corn and soybean side of things. So that might have a negative impact to the program, but we're just excited to have a program, have that option out there for processors and producers, and are looking forward to see how it goes. Next slide, please. So challenges ahead. Certainly we have a new administration in DC. So we expect a steep learning curve for a lot of those folks, and some challenges as we meet each other, we learn each other, and kind of figure out how we can work together and how that all goes. Other challenges that the department through legislation is hoping to address this year is how can we work together to move the needle on water quality in our lakes and streams? How do we address the lack of small meat processing capacity in South Dakota? And how can we replace the open class beef barn and strengthen our state fair for generations to come? And how do we slow the spread of emerald ash borer in South Dakota? And I'll kind of go over a few of those. Next slide, please. So those are kind of our bills. The governor's omnibus water funding bill is a big thing for the department. It's $14+ million this year, plus some extra authority to loan to those local infrastructure projects. Next slide, please. So the DEX, the Dakota Events Complex with an X, is something that we're working on right now. We had a terrible fire at the state fair on early Halloween morning. It was caused by a faulty electrical cord on a refrigerator in the concession stand at the beef complex. The beef complex was a 90,000 square foot facility on their state fairgrounds that hosted a lot of livestock type events, hosted a big red roundup, a lot of different events. During the fair, it was always the open class beef barn is what was hosted there, but then outside of the fair week, it was used for a lot of different rodeo type events, riding events. So it was a tragedy. Fortunately, no animals or nor people were hurt in that fire, but it was a total loss. Right now, that building's being demolished. Fortunately, Governor, we looked at that facility, and adjacent to that facility is a sheep barn that is well past its useful life. We would, through working with the governor's office and her budget, proposed a bigger, better facility that would be able to host some more events, but then also kind of lock in that need that we need at the state fair to kind of host these off fair week needs. Proposal from Governor Noem was to provide $12 million in one-time funding. We have a little over $3 million in insurance payments pending still. And then we're fundraising from people across the state for an additional $4 million. So it'll be a $19 million facility, 200,000 plus square feet, be able to host two, next slide, please. There you go. Be able to host two rodeo arenas at one time and seat up to 7,000 people. Pretty cool open structure, very unique in South Dakota. We don't have anything that checks this box right now. So I think it'll be a good opportunity to get more people in South Dakota enjoying our great hospitality, but then also just more opportunity for South Dakota citizens to get out and recreate, especially outside of summer season. Next slide, please. We're proposing a $5 million in one time for a meat processing grant program. What the impetus of this is, how do we get, through the pandemic, we learned that we definitely don't have enough small meat processors in the state or enough capacity to really move the needle. How can the state support that and really spur a lot of additional capacity across the state for meat processing from these small processors? Kind of what we're looking at is providing partial grants for coolers, freezers, contractors cost, portion cutters, so it's all sorts of processing equipment that these processors will need. All these processors right now are booked out for at least a year. I talked to one of the meat lockers I work with, and they said they're getting reservations for 2024. So there's certainly demand out there. What this program's goal is, how do we get them to expand capacity so we can just serve more demand instead of just being busy for 2 or 3 years? How do we increase that level and take advantage of this, farm to consumer swing that we've seen through the pandemic is really what we're focused on. So I think it's been a very sad story when you look at and trying times for a lot of our ag producers going through the pandemic, and a trying time for consumers when they see empty shelves at the grocery store and $7 hamburger. We've seen people say, hey, I can look at my neighbor down the road or someone that's just out of town and maybe buy direct and know where that meat comes from and get it prepared the way I want it or processed the way I want it and have meat in the freezer all the time. So I think it's a neat thing. Then that's why we're bringing forward this meat processing grant program proposal. Next slide, please. Another thing that the merged departments has really helped move the needle on is bringing the Department of Agriculture and DENR together to roll out what we're calling the Riparian Buffer Initiative, RBI. Our goal is to establish over 3,000 acres of new riparian buffers across the state that will make measurable water quality improvements in South Dakota's impaired watersheds. Our first step is we have legislation on it, House Bill 1042, to increase tax breaks. So currently in state law, you can get a 40% tax break on land that's next to rivers and streams in South Dakota. You can get a 40% tax decrease on that land. If you have a riparian buffer strip. In state law, what the riparian buffer strip means is it's next to a listed lake and stream, plus it needs to be 50 foot of perennial vegetative cover, at least 4 inches in height, and you do not graze that during from May till September. So it's really been shown. An example would be Skunk Creek going into the Big Sioux River. We've had a lot of success with riparian buffers, and this is kind of building on that. Our bill just increases the incentive from 40% to 50%, but then also currently you need a landowner that has a buffer strip enrolled in that property tax reduction needs to apply every year. We've been told by landowners that that's a pain. We've also been told by county officials that that's a pain as well, and 10 years kind of makes sense. You don't follow these rules unless you're in it kind of for the long haul. Additionally, we're working, the merged agencies working with, leading the way with a lot of partners to acquire funding and establish a state riparian buffer project, which will provide incentives for buffers beyond just the property tax side of things. So property tax is a small number when you look at economics of what folks can do on that land. An example is if I have Big Sioux River land that lays right, I could be, and is farmable, I could be raising 150, 200 bushel corn there instead by farming right up to the bank. Certainly that's not good for water quality, but it's probably good for the bottom line of those producers. What we're looking to do is roll out a payment program to provide, sign folks up for this, provide a cash payment over 10 years to implement those riparian buffer strips. We're working with partners and applying for a federal grant to roll out this project, probably looking at that $12 million plus amount is what we're going to start with for for the first 10 years. Kind of twofold parts to it, probably a broader statewide initiative at kind of a lower incentive rate, and then a higher cash incentive rate to really move the needle in some very targeted impaired watersheds that we can track if we did make actual improvements to our water quality on and hopefully show those beneficial results. So timelines there, kind of self-explanatory. Next slide, please. Emerald ash borer is something that was found in Sioux Falls in 2018. There's currently a quarantine in place for Minnehaha, Lincoln, and Turney counties. We continue to track it. We do some biocontrol activities for it too, conduct street tree inventories. This is something that's moved from the east across the U.S. It's one of these things that we're probably not going to be able to stop forever. It's going to continue to move across the state, but we're doing what we can to limit that expansion. You look around most neighborhoods in South Dakota, and we have a very high amount of ash trees. And if you're not treating your ash tree every year when your area is infected, you're gonna lose those ash trees. So it's definitely a landscape type changing problem that we're certainly trying to help slow the spread on and prevent. Next slide, please. Yeah, so not a lot to that slide, just kind of a little picture of what they look like. So if you're suspicious that you have them or concerned, certainly reach out to the Department of Agriculture. We have a state forester and staff spread out across the state to help troubleshoot those if you have them. So also Professor John Ball is at SDSU. A lot of what he does is consult for the Department of Agriculture as well. So he's a great resource and can troubleshoot this stuff as well. Next slide, please. So, silver linings tied to the COVID-19 pandemic. It's certainly been a challenge for us, but it's allowed both agencies to kind of reboot and refocus on customer service. We've been able to capitalize on remote inspection, something that both agencies hadn't really done before. Whether that be holding the iPad up and walking around a wastewater treatment plant, or just doing a desk inspection and making sure that all our reporting requirements are covered. That's something that we've been able to do. This will not be a full-time, every inspection thing does not fit as a remote inspection, but certainly doing some things that make sense for South Dakota, and it's something that we are implementing into our day-to-day practice and something we'll be doing in the future. Transitioning to online training and testing options for customers and staff is just something we've had to do. It's worked well. An example would be a pesticide applicator training. There's some great online resources for that, and seems to be well received from the industry. So, and we're getting good results for testing too. So it's something that we will further implement across the state. Overall, I'm just proud of how our staff has handled, themselves during this difficult time while staying safe. It's something, it's challenging for everyone. So just wanted to tout them a little bit. Next slide, please. Like to end with just kind of customer service is a very important thing for both agencies. It's a priority for me. And when I talk customer service for a regulatory agency, I'm talking every citizen of South Dakota. We want to be responsive to their concerns, get back to them, talk to them about what their issues are, explain the rules and regulations and laws and if they're being followed or what needs to be followed, just being a good resource for them. A lot of both agencies' relationships are long-term relationships, whether it be a dairy farm or, the wastewater treatment plant in Brookings. They build those facilities for 40 years, and we need good relationships with them as a regulator. I tell my staff, and it's the staff's priority, is getting these permittees into compliance is our number one mission. It's not the gotcha, you did something wrong, we're going to levy these big fines on you. Our number one priority is getting people back in compliance and then go from there. If you don't follow our rules and if you don't follow the plan to get back in compliance that we've helped you work on, then that's when the other kind of the stick comes out and we need to use it. But certainly our priority is customer service and working with our permittees to get them back in compliance, because that's just that's a win-win for everyone. We all make mistakes, but how we move off those mistakes is very important. So like I said before, integrity, excellence, customer service are our priorities. And I think through this merger, we're seeing success rolling them out to the whole staff. So next slide, please. With that, any questions? And Kelsey, did I miss anything else that you brought up that you guys wanted to talk about?
I am going to pull up the notes that I have. We don't have any Q&A in the queue yet, so get those in. One point we were looking to learn a little on is what the future is going to look like as far as hemp legislation and rules and things like that. Do you have anything you can share with us on that front?
Sure. We have a program on industrial hemp. It's taking applications now. I guess the department's position is let's have a season, let's have a growing season, let's get a crop out and then reevaluate what we would like to do. See where it's going from there, see what we can do better, see if some rules need to be tweaked. That's our number one priority. Of course, there's the other discussion about medical marijuana and recreational marijuana. There's some overlap there. What people don't know is that our state regulations for industrial hemp need to follow USDA's regulations. So it's not just it's not a state problem, it's a USDA problem too. So as more states get into the recreational marijuana world, to me, I don't think it makes near as much sense to have such a heavy-handed regulatory industrial hemp program. So that's something we'll have to just keep evaluating on and move the way we need to make sure that we're serving the citizens of the state. So it's not an easy thing, but that's kind of where we're at.
What's kind of the expectation as far as, I guess, public involvement and what that's going to look like? I mean, do you have any sense of where this is going to go?
So are you talking medical, recreational, or are you talking
hemp?
Okay, hemp. There is an industrial hemp association, and the two processors are certainly, I know them on a first name basis. The two primary processors, we just got an application for a third one the other day, but they're very active. There's some growers very active with the legislature. There's several legislators very actively involved in industrial hemp and help create the program that we have. So any outreach can be had through me. There'll be some discussions this legislative session, but I don't know if there'll be any legislation that ends up coming just on industrial hemp. There'll be a lot of discussions on recreational and medical marijuana, and that is not as much of an ag issue, an industrial hemp issue, as it is kind of a different regulation.
Our panelists are on it early here. Tim, I'm going to move you to an attendee here. Tim says he looks like Darth Vader with his neck thing on. Okay, so we talked about the combining of the departments, and I apologize if you covered this particular point, but will this have impact on permitting processes, on the concentrating animal feeding operations?
Good question. So historically, the departments, DENR's had a feedlot program. We're combining it with livestock service, or combining it into a new agency with livestock services. Timing wise, the department's always tried to stay under that 60 days turnaround for a permit before you start the public interaction process. We are at that right now, and I don't anticipate that changing. So same process, no real changes.
Okay. Did you talk about CAFOs?
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of a broad question on what's going on with CAFOs. What we're seeing is a little uptick in what are combined animal feeding or consolidated animal feeding operations across the state. I would say not as much of a number of facilities, it's just there's some bigger ones. So the dairy industry with the new cheese plant at Lake Norden seen a pretty big boom in that side. An example would be last fiscal year, we added 22,000 permitted dairy cows in South Dakota. So definitely seeing a big uptick there on that side of things. We've seen some on on the hog side, some on the turkey side, but really the dairy side's where we've seen the most growth. And frankly, since I've been at DENR, I've added 3.5 staff to that program to make sure we're doing our job, getting our inspections in, turning around permits in a timely fashion. So, and just for people that know, if you meet the CAFO fee or the CAFO permit requirements and you have a state general permit, it's a zero discharge facility. So to get rid of your manure, you apply it on fields at an approved rate. So you're not over applying manure. You need to follow that plan. And your fields need to be in a nutrient management plan. You need to follow those criteria so it doesn't degrade the state's waters.
Got it. My last question personally. So the department is now going to be called DANR, right?
Mm-hmm.
Writing out all of those long words, trying to fit them into my slideshows just wasn't happening. So I'm really appreciative that we shortened it down. Thank you.
No problem.
Awesome. Well, I don't see any other Q&A in the queue, so it looks like you covered everything, and that was a wonderful presentation. So Secretary Roberts, thank you so much. I have one question that came in via text here from our Leadership Brookings group. Do you see nitrates as an upcoming issue in South Dakota?
Well, I mean, nitrates are an issue in certain parts of South Dakota too. An example would be, obviously the department's watching it closely. One example would be in the Big Sioux Aquifer. Actually, DENR, we just rolled out a plan. We dug a couple wells this year, monitor wells this year. In some of the upper Big Sioux River aquifers or area, there's been an increase in nitrates, and then there's been a decrease in nitrates, and we're trying to figure out what the science is behind that. First step would be put monitor wells in there and do a study on it. So that's where we're at today. We've drilled a couple wells. We're taking samples 3 times a year. We're monitoring that. We're going to dig one more further north, I think. So certainly that's something we're watching very closely, and continue to monitor that data. And right now we're collecting more of that data to make sure we know if it's human caused, if it's animal caused, or if it's just natural cause. Is something that we definitely need to be diligent about, because if you get those nitrate levels too high, then it degrades the water and causes all sorts of issues.
Awesome. Well, Hunter, thank you so much for joining us and giving us your time today. We know you're busy, and we wish we could be there in person, but we really appreciate you and all you're doing. Best of luck in this process that you're going through. It's exciting, and I think it's gonna end up being a big positive for everyone. So congratulations on everything, and we hope to see you soon.
All right. Thank you for your time. Have a good day.